So we're really chasing what was the connection between marbling and high oleic acid. There's two different gene sets. We're still trying to find the magic bullet for marbling, but oleic acid, you feed corn. And so like 40 plus years of research boils down to feed corn, and then and the longer you feed corn, the more oleic acid, the more marbling.
Welcome to the Beef Nutrition Blackbelt Podcast, brought to you by Genetics. I'm Zach Smith, Associate Professor at South Dakota State, and we're dedicated to bring you the latest insights and discussions in the beef industry. Get ready to expand your knowledge and stay ahead with today's episode. I'm excited to be joined here today by Dr. Stephen Smith, Regents Fellow Emeritus and retired Senior Faculty Fellow at Texas A&M. So Dr. Smith, excited to have you here. Just real quickly, kind of tell us your path as it relates to marbling. I know it's led you all across the globe and some pretty pivotal papers that have helped us better understand the ability for cattle to lay down intermuscular adipose tissue and how that's really enhanced product quality and value to the beef chain.
Well, okay. Short story. In the late 80s, Japan opened up its beef market, and a coworker, Dave Lunt and Gary Smith, went over to Japan to learn the grading system, and they found out that actually indirectly that Japanese really value soft fat. And I thought, well, and they came back and they said, well, why would the fat be soft? And I was thinking linoleic, a polyunsaturated fatty acid. So the next trip, they brought back some samples from some A5 carcasses, the best quality. And this was back in like 1989, 90. And we measured it. And yes, just fat samples, not the beef. And it was really high in oleic acid. And some research has been coming out from medical labs that showed that oleic acid is good for you. It decreases LDL, it increases HDL. So that got me on the track, and several years working with Japan and then Australia. We found that countries like Japan, Korea that feed high corn diets, they have increased marbling and increased oleic acid. So I started going to Japan in like 1990 and went there several times, in Korea over the years. So we're really chasing what was the connection between marbling and high oleic acid. There's two different gene sets. We're still trying to find the magic bullet for marbling, but oleic acid, you feed corn. And so like 40 plus years of research boils down to feed corn, and then and the longer you feed corn, the more oleic acid, the more marbling.
No, that's interesting. And I can recall when I was working on my PhD, I worked in Dr. Brad Johnson's lab at Texas Tech, and he did a lot of work with intermuscular adipocytes and feeding certain agonists that kind of upregulate those genes. I recall steryl-CoA desaturase being important, I believe, PPAR gamma and GPR43. And oleic acid always seemed to be a preferential ligand for those genes. Am I getting that correct, or have I forgotten my biochemistry?
The PPAR gamma, not SC, well, I'm going to call it SCD, steryl-CoA desaturase, and not a ligand for that. But we feel, and it's been hard to prove, the starch in corn will turn on the gene, the SCD gene. So, and maybe it's an insulin response, something about the glucose that gets past the rumen and will turn on the SCD gene. And separately, that will maybe separately turn on the marbling genes. So marbling, whole set of genes, SCD, oleic acid, just one gene.
So actually, with that, Dr. Smith, there was probably some of the early work you did when you were still at Mark was looking at the substrates for the different depots of fat prefer. I know glucose was preferential to intermuscular adipocytes. Subcutaneous fat really was preferential to acetate. Would you give us like a 1,000-foot view of how you tripped up onto that and kind of the impacts that real basic discovery had and translated into the cattle feeding business as a way that we better understand how cattle can marble, and really seen an increase of prime choice and fewer select carcasses in the last 40 years?
Okay, I was at Mark, USDA Mark, as a postdoc. I joined the meats research unit. Russell Cross was my unit head, and I was working I did a lot of work on rat liver cells as a grad student. I was working with that, and we were studying substrates. So a lot of in vitro work, and which substrate would be the better. And Russell Cross said, "Well, you're working with outside fat. Why don't you work with marbling?" And being a city kid, I said, "What's marbling?" Anyway, so it was just serendipitous. We did the same thing. We added glucose flask and acetate, all that kind of stuff, and turned out that glucose was marbling adipose tissue as preferential use. Glucose is its primary substrate. So that, and I published that paper in '84 after I'd come to A&M. And for some reason, it was just a biochemical paper, Journal of Nutrition. Not an animal science paper, but that got a lot of traction.
That's a pivotal paper that most graduate students, in Beef Nutrition, my students read that and try to better understand it. So obviously you were interested in marbling. And then I know at some point you talked about finding that the beef that came from Japan was rich in soft fat. It was oleic acid. You'd read some health papers. This was kind of in a time when there was a war on beef, at least on fat. And that seems to have changed the tides. We think about carnivore diets and people consuming more protein and fat. What was the first study you did on, I think it was making ground beef patties from Angus cross steers at Texas A&M. You had a collaborator over in another department. Y'all fed those to humans and then assessed their LDL and HDL concentrations. And then somewhere along the way, it got all the way to that, oh man, brisket has really got a lot of intermuscular adipose tissue, and you started making brisket burgers. Tell us a little bit about that work.
Based on the work from the medical community and our work with the Japanese cattle, my wife was an RDN, registered dietitian nutritionist. And years ago, I came home, I said, we know how to produce really healthy beef. It is higher in oleic acid. And she said, "You can't say that." Why? It's higher in oleic acid. And she said, unless you do a human study, and actually demonstrate any kind of effect, you cannot say any kind of beef, grass-fed, is healthier. You have to use, it has to be a human population. So that led to several studies. And the first study was published in 2010. Some crossbred. The best study, we actually fed Angus cattle to prime or grass fed. And why do we use ground beef? You might ask. Well, we can set the fat level in ground beef, so we get away from, well, was it the increase in fat or the increase in oleic acid? So by using ground beef and setting the fat level, and it was like at 24%, we tried to go higher, but the grass-fed, the carcasses, they just didn't have enough fat on them. So we've done studies, and I may be taking too much credit, but shortly thereafter, Heart brand beef came out, and it's called Heart brand because the Akaushi cattle are higher in oleic acid.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
So maybe that's wrong, but I'm feeding my ego here.
Sounds good.
Feed formulation software is stuck in the past. Most tools haven't evolved beyond basic least cost optimization. A Diet Forge changes that. It's an AI-powered platform with nonlinear ingredient modeling for enzymes and additives, cost per gain and maximum profit optimization, and real-time collaboration like Google Docs for nutrition. Every recommendation is grounded in world-class research, built for modern nutritionists who need more than legacy desktop software can deliver. Work seamlessly with your team and optimize the way modern operations demand. Try dietforge.ai free today. Feed formulation, finally modernized.
So when you did this work originally, you would have started with fed the cattle at Texas A&M, fed the product to humans. Was this one of the first of its kind? I mean, when you think about beef and the war on fat and now telling people they should consume beef fat, was there a lot of work done on feeding beef and looking at the healthful benefits to humans prior to this work?
There were several studies, but most of them compared beef to poultry, beef to another protein source. And so we were feeding, and there was a study out of Europe, I think Great Britain. They only looked at markers. They didn't look at HDL. They're just looking at plasma levels. So as far as I know, we remain the only lab that has fed different, the last study, different fat levels, but different compositions, and to humans, to men and women, and separate studies, or men and women, a same study. So there's not a lot going on, and I really wish there was. Part of the scientific principle is other people repeating the study and confirming or negating the results that we published.
No, and I think you make a good point here, Dr. Smith. When we think about funding opportunities in the USA, we have commodity organizations, we have private industry, we have federal grant opportunities. But, things like NCBA or beef industry checkoff dollars that we can get in our state, a lot of times it's about product quality and human nutrition. And as an animal nutritionist, I'm interested in growth performance, efficiency, and carcass quality. But it wouldn't be that hard to take the next step to say, all right, how does this resultant management strategy improve the perceived image of beef? And so that's actually pretty inspirational. I need to sit around and think about what we're working on and other colleagues could work on to where we could take that next step to look at the product. Well, that concludes another episode of the Beef Nutrition Blackbelt Podcast presented by Wyzenetics. Until next time, this is Zach Smith from the Beef Nutrition Blackbelt Podcast signing off.
Thanks, Zach.